All right, it's time for another check-in. And I'm doing this because this question often comes up. And it's something that might be a bit new for us as well if we only get started in the fitness area. And that is protein. So a lot of people ask me, like, how can I get enough protein? Where can I get my protein from? Should I take protein powder? And I totally get it. In the beginning, protein is this kind of mystery topic a bit. And I remember also struggling with it in the beginning. And I also think everybody struggles with it in the beginning. So that's why I want to give you a few tips how you can get enough protein in your diet. So first of all, look at your recommendations and see what works for you. So you have gotten our nutrition recommendations, and there's a specific amount of protein to eat. And this is a recommendation, and it's always good to test that and see how it works. So for example, for me, when I got my nutrition recommendations, I followed that, and then at some stage I observed I'm gonna reduce this a little bit, and it still works. So I found out the point that works for me, where I'm still gaining muscle, but I also don't have to force too much protein inside me. So for me, that's between 140 and 160 grams. But again, I've done trial and error with that, and I need to recommend you the same thing, because everybody is different, and what works for me might not work for you. So again, follow your nutrition recommendations, see what works, and test around a bit with it, because that's honestly where the fun is. If we don't have any real challenge with it, if we don't have any curiosity part with it, if we just follow instructions, like, there's no creativity with it, there's no fun. But if we can actually make this a little bit like a detective game, or solving a puzzle, then there's so much more enthusiasm around it. So I've always really liked this part, just figuring out what works, and just having fun with it. So then, when it comes to the protein sources, it does depend a little bit on which kind of eater you are. So if you are a normal meat eater, so let's say you eat everything, you eat meat, you eat eggs, and all the other foods as well, getting enough protein is, let's say, fairly easy if you eat meat, a lot of meat. Actually, I take that back, it's not a lot of meat, but if you take around 250 grams per day or so, you already get a very good amount of protein. And if you just incorporate that into your day, you don't have that many struggles. But then, of course, there's also people that don't want to eat that much meat, and I totally understand that. And maybe you also don't want to eat so many eggs. So I also totally understand that, and luckily we have different protein sources that we can add. I bring this up because meat, especially meat, is very good available for our body, so we take more protein up into our body and can then use that for our muscles. And it's also higher in protein compared to calories. So for example, another protein source is nuts, but nuts have a lot more calories because they have a lot more fat in them. So if we get the same amount of protein from nuts and, let's say, chicken breast, the calories for the nuts will be a lot higher, and so we might already have way too many calories and it doesn't quite fit. So that's why meat is just such a good protein source. But as I said, if you don't eat meat, or if you don't want to eat a lot of meat, that's also totally fine. There's other ways that you can get enough protein. And I already mentioned nuts and seeds. So also something like sesame, for example, also has protein. Then there's also beans, so soybean, for example, and other types of beans. And then, of course, the products that are made from beans and soy, like tofu, tempeh, also has more protein. And then, of course, we have dairy that also has protein. It depends a bit on the dairy, of course, but we also can get a good amount of protein from those products. But again, if you don't eat dairy, like me, I'm allergic to dairy, so I need to find alternatives for that. So I eat a bit more meat. Then a question that often comes up is if you should take protein powder. And for me, my answer to that is always, it depends. You don't have to eat protein powder. And maybe this is the simple answer to this, because you don't have to if you don't want to. But it can be convenient. So if you, for example, don't eat meat, and you have a very busy schedule and you don't want to cook a lot for you, and then in the restaurants itself there's often not such a high amount of protein on the plate. So in those cases it can be really, really convenient to just have some protein powder that you can mix to your smoothie, or depending on the type of protein powder, you can also just add that to water and shake it and just drink it like that. So that is very, very convenient. In case you don't know, we also have egg white protein powder, so this is all natural compared to other protein powders that often have a lot of additives in them, which some people can't digest very well and get skin rashes or so. But the protein powder that we have, it's pure egg white, so it's also not dairy, and you can basically mix it to everything. I don't recommend to mix it in water because it doesn't have so much taste on its own, but you can mix it to your oats, your smoothies, to boboa, to your soup, even to stir fry. You can make your salad dressings from it, or you can bake with it. So it's very, very versatile, and you can add a lot of protein to your normal dishes. So again, protein powder, there is no right or wrong. It just depends a bit on your lifestyle, and again, it's very convenient, and it's also good in certain circumstances to use it for baking, for example, so you can add protein powder to your baking or to other foods, and it just increases the protein content. And then one more tip that I want to give you along the way is to focus on your protein. Because when you start with your fitness and you change your diet a bit, oftentimes, we start asking ourselves like, okay, what should I cook? And what really helped me is to focus on the protein source first. So I always looked at, and I was tracking at that time, so I also highly recommend to use MyFitnessPal or another app where you can see how much protein content is in your food. And then you can build around that. So you can, for example, schedule a certain amount of meat and other foods that have a higher protein content. You can put that into the app, and then you can build around that and see, okay, what else can I put into my daily nutrition so that it adds up to the overall calories that I want to consume. So for me, it just really helped to focus on this, to make protein the priority, and then of course also build delicious meals around that. But it just helps, because otherwise you often end up with way too many carbs or too much fat also. So again, these are my tips. If you have more questions to that, just put them in the Telegram chat, because then I can answer it, and also answer the questions of probably many other women, because we all have very similar struggles here. So with that being said, have a good workout session, and as always, be powerful.